Welcome to your F2 course. It builds on F1. So F1, remember, is financial reporting and taxation. What F2 does is it focuses on the financial reporting aspects and takes it up to the next level, which is why it's called Advanced Financial Reporting. At F1, amongst other things, we looked at short-term sources of finance. Now, at F2, we take that finance theme onwards, but we look at long-term sources of finance. So the different types available to us, how we go about raising them, and the advantages and disadvantages of each, along with some calculations of cost of capital. So why do we need long-term finance? In particular, to finance our capital investments, so buying shares in other companies. That's what's going to be relevant to F2. What else we're going to have a look at? Well, we're also going to see the more complex aspects of group accounting. So let's compare what we did at F1 with what we're going to see at F2. So at F1 we saw two consolidated primary statements, your consolidated statement of financial position, i.e. the balance sheet, and your consolidated statement of profit or loss and other comprehensive income, i.e. your income statement. And we saw how to treat a subsidiary and how to treat an associate in those consolidated primary statements. What are we going to do at F2? Well, we're going to continue on with those two consolidated primary statements, and we'll talk about some complexities we're going to bring in there. But we're also going to learn how to consolidate two new primary statements. So your consolidated statement of changes in equity. So you saw that for an individual company at F1, but not for a group. And another statement that we saw for an individual company at F1, but not for a group, which is a statement of cash flows. So it's going to be the same technique now, but we're just going to see a few extra headings for group cash flows that we didn't see for individual company ones. What other angles of groups are going to come in? Well, we're going to be bringing in some advanced groups aspects. So the sort of things we're going to be seeing are buying and selling some shares in the year. We're going to also see a situation where your subsidiary has got its own subsidiary. How do we deal with that? And we're going to see what happens if we have a foreign subsidiary. So we're going to have to translate it before we consolidate it. And also, as well as subsidiaries and associates, which we're going to carry on seeing, we're going to see a new type of investment called a joint arrangement, where we have joint control. What else are we going to see? Well, we're going to be looking at some more accounting standards, so new ones that we didn't see at F1 around recognition and measurement. So we're going to be looking at financial instruments, so that's new to F2. We're going to be also looking at leases. We're going to be looking at provisions. We're going to be having a look at deferred tax. So the only part of tax that you see at F2 level is how to account for deferred tax. And what else we're going to see? We're going to see share-based payments. We're going to be seeing revenue. And we're going to be seeing construction contracts. So that's what we're going to be having a look at in terms of recognition and measurements. So recognition is talking about when and where you record that item in your financial statements, as in where do you record it? Do you record it in the same financial position, in a splocky, in which section? And measurement, we're going to be looking at what number. And the other thing we need to be considering that you've got a specific syllabus learning outcome for is what are the accounting entries for all of these standards. And we're going to also be having a look at a couple of disclosure IASs. We're going to be looking at related parties, so buying or selling from companies or people over which there is a relationship of control or influence. And we're going to be looking at earnings per share. And also we're going to continue the theme that we saw of ethics in financial reporting on from F1, but now it's going to be applied to some of the F2 accounting standards. So how does this all tie into the syllabus learning outcomes and the weightings? Well, sources of long-term finance, you can see, makes up 15% of your syllabus, and it's covered in 2 chapters of the course notes, chapters 1 and chapter 2. So remember, we're looking at how to raise the different sources of finance, the different types of the sources of finance, and in chapter 2, the calculation of the cost of capital. Financial reporting is the largest syllabus area because it covers all of these different accounting standards that I've just been talking to you about, and it also covers off all of these different groups aspects that we've been talking about. So it's a really chunky part of your syllabus, and that is covered in your course notes in chapters 3 to 18. So it's the bulk of your course notes. It's the most technical area of the paper. So what's the area we haven't talked about yet? Well, it's the remaining 25% of analysis of performance and position. And this is covered in just one chapter, although it's quite a lengthy one, chapter 19. And that's because it's a real common sense area. It's not technical, and it's such a useful commercial skill that you're going to find it really helpful in the working environment. So what sort of things are we going to be having to do here? Well, if we think about the different syllabus learning outcomes, we're going to have to know how to calculate ratios. They lend themselves well to an objective test question, but also how to evaluate performance and position. So performance is all talking about your profitability, so your margins, and also your efficiency, so your asset turnover ratios. It's really focused on the SPLOCI, whereas position is focused on the statement of financial position and is looking at things like liquidity, your solvency, so your gearing, and also your working capital management, so receivable, payables, and inventory days, which actually you touched on at F1. And also we're going to be having a look at the action that management could take to improve their performance and position, so giving commercial advice, and also limitations of ratio analysis. So those are the different areas we're going to focus on there. So that's a really lovely area because it has real life absolute application, and also it's not as heavily technical as some of the other syllabus areas. Let's now consider the exam itself. So what do we need to get to pass? Well, we need to get a mark of 70% or more. How are we going to sit this exam? Well, we're going to do it on a computer. It's a computer-based rather than a paper-based assessment. We have 90 minutes in which to complete 60 questions, so that gives us 1.5 minutes per question. So we just need to be quite careful with our internal time management during the exam. What about the weighting? Well, that's going to be as per the syllabus areas. So in F2, remember, syllabus area A was your sources of long-term finance, and that was 15% of your syllabus, so that will be 15% of the exam. Syllabus area B, financial reporting, that was all of your accounting standards and your group accounting areas, along with ethics and disclosure standards, is 60% of the syllabus and therefore 60% of the exam. And then syllabus area C, which is your analysis of performance and position, that's 25% of the syllabus, so that will be 25% of the exam. Now, you can't get away with selectively learning because CIMA have said that every single learning outcome will be tested in every exam. What question types can I expect to see? Well, we've got multiple choice, which is where you choose one from 4 answers and you choose the correct one. Multi-response, the typical number of statements in multi-response is 6, so typically you might have to choose, say, 3 from 6 statements which are correct. For example, of these 6 reasons, which are valid reasons for return on capital employed increasing, for example? Drag and drop, that lends itself very nicely to dragging and dropping the correct number into a pro forma, for example in a consolidated statement of changes in equity, or for example into a ratio formula. So you might have to say what lives on the top half and the bottom half of a ratio, drag and drop it in from a number of selected options that they give you. Gap fill, F2 lends itself very nicely to number entry. So the figure for goodwill and the consolidated statement of financial position is, and then you have to calculate it and type in the answer, or say earnings per share for the year is, or maybe we might have some missing words in a narrative definition or an explanation, for example. Hotspot, you don't tend to see too many of these at F2 level, but this is where you have to click on the correct part of some kind of diagram, so maybe some kind of graph or a model or a picture. So that's what we mean by hotspot. Drop down list is where you click on a box, say in a pro forma or a word in a sentence, and a list of numbers or a list of words will show, and you have to select the right one to go in. So quite similar in a way to drag and drop, but rather than physically pulling the number in or the word in with your mouse, you just click on it from a pre-populated list. So for example, to say numbers in a pro forma lend themselves nicely to that. Now the booking availability, you can sit the exam whenever you want in a centre of your choice, and as soon as you complete the exam you find out whether you've passed or failed, so the result is immediate. So how are we going to pass our exam? Well, you need to be focusing on working your way up the achievement ladder towards exam success. So you're going to take a knowledge topic, for example you take knowledge topic 1, you try the assessment to see how good your existing knowledge of that topic is from previous studies, for example. Then you're going to have a look at the relevant chapter of your course notes, and then you've got more questions available to practice under practice and apply. And you've then got at various stages through your knowledge topics, you're going to have your steps interspersed. And if you look at the contents page of your course notes, it will tell you exactly where those steps fit in. And if we have a look further down here, it says our first step should be to construct a study plan based around the dates that we would attempt each step of that achievement ladder. So we've got 6 steps, so you need to build them into the calendar and make sure that you do complete the relevant knowledge topics, the assessments, the chapters of the course notes with the online lectures and the practice and apply in order to meet those step deadlines. And don't forget that you've got available as well the further question practice. So if you find that after having gone through the assessment, the chapter of the course notes, the online lecture and the practice and apply, you want a bit further question practice before attempting your steps, then that's available to you. Or let's say that after attempting your step you think, oh, I was a bit weak on some of the areas, you can go into those further question practice too. So what do we also need to do? Well, we need to think widely and read widely by trying to put our topics, concepts and ideas into context. So I want to give you now some specific tips of areas that I would go and look at for F2. So what resources are very useful for F2? Well, keep your eye out on CIMA's website for any articles, for example. They'll normally be arranged by paper. A website I find very handy is www.iasplus.com, which is written by Deloitte, and what it's absolutely fantastic for is really good summaries of accounting standards. So really good summaries of your IAS and IFRS. So I think you'll find that a really, really nice website. Something else I find useful is Google Finance. Google Finance is a great way of choosing a company that you're interested in and monitoring what's happening to its ratios and its share price. So that's really useful for your interpretation, your analysis of financial performance and position. So the IAS Plus website is very, very useful for syllabus area B, your financial reporting area, and Google Finance for syllabus area C, having a look at the key ratios and the key numerical indicators like share prices of different companies that you're interested in. Also, it does link into sources of finance as well, because you'll have, I'll show you in a moment, but you'll have related news articles, links to them, attached to them, so you can see if a company's had to raise new finance. And the other thing that I encourage you to do is to look up some real life financial statements, because I think if you can see how a company prepares its accounts in real life, a company that you're interested in, it helps to get the big picture of what you're trying to achieve when you're studying your accounting standards. So let's take a look at iasplus.com. So you can see I've typed in there www.iasplus.com, and then once you get in, you want to hit the tab that says Standards. And then you can scroll down and you'll see all the IFRSs and IASs, and you can pick on the ones that are in the F2 syllabus. So for example, I might be interested to have a look at a summary of leases. So I click on IAS 17 and we've got a little overview. Don't worry about the history, but what's really important is this summary section. So it's worth going in there for all of the examinable accounting standards and printing off a summary, because it explains in really basic terms the key points you need to know about every accounting standard. So a very useful resource. Let's look at Google Finance now. So you can see I've typed in the Google address, and then if you click here, you can see all the different various applications Google has, and you want to click on Google Finance. And then what you need to do is just type in a company you're interested in. So for example, I'm going to type in Tesco, because I'm interested in Tesco, which is a large international supermarket chain. And you can see you've got a drop down menu here. I'm going to click on Tesco PLC, and you can see up here a whole load of different financial data. So what's in really big bold print here is the share price at the moment. But what's really useful is you've got a whole load of investor ratios, like your price earnings ratio, and it even explains what each of those ratios mean. If you click on it, you can see there. And we've got dividend yield, earnings per share, and so on. And also you can draw a graph. So you can see here, this is a graph of the share price, and you can change the period it's for. So let's say that I want to change it over 1 year period. I can change it to 1 year, and then I can compare it to things. Can you see up here, I can compare it to the FTSE 100 share price to see how it's doing. So you can see the FTSE 100 is in red and Tesco's in blue. So you can see that Tesco's have had a lot more difficulty with their share price compared to the FTSE 100. And you can also bring in some rivals. So we've got Sainsbury's now, who have come in with the orange line, and we've also got Morrison's, who've come in with the green line. So you can see how they've been faring compared to each other. So you can see that to start off, Tesco's is doing better, and then we find that more recently, due to the accounting scandal that Tesco's been suffering, that Sainsbury's and Morrison's have been doing better than Tesco's, but all supermarkets are struggling compared to the FTSE 100. And that's probably partly due at the moment to the recession and the competition from low-cost budget supermarkets such as Lidl and Aldi. But you should pick what companies you're interested in, and you should follow them. And can you see down the side you've got news, and they've got linked articles. So say we go, just take off the FTSE 100 again, take off Sainsbury's, take off Morrison's, and you can see, perhaps if we go on a shorter time period, you can see all of these numbers here linked to the relevant news articles, and you can read to see why the share price has gone up or down and why the ratio has gone up or down. So that brings me to the end of this introductory session. I really hope you'll enjoy F2 as much as I do. It really is my favourite topic. And once you finish this exam, you're going to have really fantastic financial reporting knowledge, which is going to be very useful in your future career.